In Parshat Vaetchanan, of course, there is one of the most famous paragraphs in the Torah, the paragraph of Shema Yisrael. This is the paragraph we read every morning and evening, as the Torah says, when you get up and when you go to sleep and when you get up. And in general, in all kinds of situations, the Jews have been reciting Shema Yisrael. And there's, of course, a lot of commentary to this paragraph, but I want to discuss today only one specific verse. It's the second verse in that paragraph. V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. You should love God your Lord. So the question is, what exactly is love with regards to Hashem? It might sound pretty simple. In fact, the continuation of this verse, there's a lot of commentary written to discuss exactly what is with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your possessions or might or whatever miodecha is, or very, very much you should love Hashem. Miodecha is a very weird word because miod means very much so. And miodecha, yo miod, exactly what does that mean? So some say it's possessions, others say it's acceptance of divine will, whatever midah, whatever is the way Hashem conducts himself towards us, we should still accept it, even if it's punishment, chas v'shalom, things like that. Then it could simply mean miod, you should love Hashem very, very much. And there are other explanations. So with regards to these three types of love, livavcha, nafshecha, umiodecha, your heart, your soul, and your miod, your very much, or your possessions. So that there is a lot of discussion. Much less is discussed the actual question of what does it mean to love Hashem. And of course, it's known that there was a great school of Jewish philosophers. One of the most famous, maybe the most famous known Jewish philosopher was Rambam, the Maimonides. And there were lots and lots of others before and after him. And they, in general, accepted a lot of the postulates of Greek philosophy and whatever the Arabs took from the Greeks. The Jews who lived in Arab lands also accepted some of those writings. So Rambam was definitely part of his general philosophical tradition. He didn't really exist in a vacuum. The most important authority for all these philosophers was usually Aristotle, especially for Rambam. Not for all the Jewish philosophers, but for Rambam in particular, Aristotle was the greatest authority, especially with regards to the physical world, as I'll still discuss it a little bit later. Rambam basically accepted more or less whatever Aristotle thought about the physical universe. So the question that a lot of philosophers, or rather the idea that a lot of philosophers arrived to is that the love towards Hashem is purely intellectual. The truth is that Rambam himself thought that the entire existence of the eternity, whatever will happen to the human beings after either immediately after they die or at least after a certain period of time, will be an existence of just the soul. The physical resurrection of the dead for Rambam is only a temporary phenomenon, and it's not even clear whether the actual souls will come back for that resurrection, or there will be some part of the lower part of the soul, or whatever, some spirit that will be in those bodies. But the actual main soul, the intellect of the person, all of his or her experiences and thoughts and decisions, whatever is combined in that memory of that person, whatever that Rambam considers the main soul, that soul is in eternal existence of closeness to Hashem, who is the perfect intellect. So it's all an intellectual level for Rambam. And therefore, the loving of Hashem also is like that. And that's how he describes in the very beginning of his main book, his magnum opus, called Mishnah Torah. Of course, the Rambam wrote a lot of books in his life, but this is the longest and the main one, possibly. And that is, in it, he put in a lot of philosophical ideas. And the very first part of that book was called Yesodei HaTorah, the fundamentals of Torah. He discusses that the mitzvah of loving Hashem. And, by the way, fearing Hashem also. And all of this is on an intellectual level for Rambam. So Rambam says that the person who understands the secrets of creation, the beautiful universe that Hashem created, right? The intellect that's needed to create such a fantastic universe can only be done by somebody, or I don't even want to say somebody, it's not really correct expression for these philosophers, more like a force of sorts, an intellect that created the entire universe has to be absolutely unbelievable, and therefore there is a tremendous love that a person will experience by understanding these things. And that's why he goes on in this Yesodei HaTorah to discuss both the physical and some of the spiritual ideas. And spiritual ideas have to do, for instance, with angels and all kinds of other things that Rambam tries to explain. But in terms of the physical, he usually uses the Aristotelian and other scientific for his time ideas. So basically, you find that a Jewish book that's written, right? The entire book of Mishnah Torah is written for the purpose of a person serving Hashem and doing the mitzvot. So most of it is very technical: how to keep Shabbat, how to keep kashrut. And here you find all of a sudden discussions about astronomy, right, and things like that. Well, what is that doing? The whole point is that according to Rambam, this is how you arrive to loving Hashem. So the mitzvah of loving Hashem can be arrived to by admiring his handiwork, so to say. And therefore, astronomy is part of it. And of course, one of the problems is the astronomy that Rambam uses is very outdated, and today astronomers don't agree with almost anything that Rambam writes. But that's not even the point. Okay, you could say that in every generation one can learn the sciences of that generation and admire Hashem even more. Newton, for instance, admired tremendously the God that made the main theory of Newton has to do with how the bodies attract each other. Like everywhere there's this force that makes it this field rather that makes everything attract according to the distance between them. Becomes less by a square of the distance and more by the mass. So it's the product of two masses of the bodies divided by the square of the distance times the specific universal constant. So that's the force of attraction of any two bodies. So since it exists everywhere, and this law is so beautiful, and it explains the beautiful paths in which all the planets and comets follow. It basically is one beautiful rule that exists in the entire universe, and that's what made Newton recognize the hand of Hashem. So whatever Rambam had in his time was based on his science, and whatever Newton had in his time was based on his science. But this sounds like it's an idea that basically the people will use the scientific discoveries in order to love Hashem. I could give maybe as a kind of mashal of sorts, a kind of comparison, just to give an idea. Let's say I was when I was young, I was into mathematics. I actually was quite accomplished in that. I got a silver medal in an international math Olympiad in Sweden at some point when I was in 11th grade. So among mathematicians, it's not uncommon for people to actually love somebody for discovering a theorem. I could easily imagine that the person in England some years ago in our generation, there was a person in England who ultimately was able to prove the great Fermat's theorem. I can imagine that a lot of people would love such a person simply because he was able to show a complex but beautiful proof of such a theorem that for hundreds of years wasn't proven. So how much more so the perfect intellect that created the entire universe with all of its beautiful constructions. So you could arrive on this type of intellectual love. However, it's not clear at all that that's what Torah means, at least on a simple level. Okay, maybe it works for some very, very smart people, love on intellectual level, the love that Rambam requires. But that's not the simple meaning of the Torah. In fact, there are a lot of what they call necessary beliefs in the Torah, meaning the Torah speaks in the language of people. And a lot of times, God is portrayed not in what really applies to God. Meaning, for example, God is angry in the Torah when we don't listen to His voice, don't keep His commandments. This is not really a true quality. God doesn't have anger, at least according to philosophers. This is all impossible. This is all just a human language. But is it a useful belief? Absolutely. So to summarize, I would say that while for some people maybe purely intellectual love that Rambam advocates can work, the majority of people, it seems, need love on emotional level, and for them, love can be understood as Hashem loving us. We have to love Him and do His will. That's the main idea. And at the end, I want to say a parable that I read years ago, that imagine, for instance, a person per se in French opposition. During the time when the Nazis conquered France, there was a very big movement, underground movement, that tried to fight. The majority of French people accepted the Germans, but there was some who went underground. So imagine there's a person in this underground, the French underground. I don't know why they use the example of French underground, but just as an example. And this person constantly gets commands from someone, but since it's all kept a secret, he has no idea who is giving the commands. But he has learned to trust. The commands usually work. Like if he's told, you have to move out of where you are, you were discovered, this place, the Germans will soon come to this place. And then he finds out, yes, his life was saved this way since he listened to the instructions. So he keeps following the instructions and finding out things that whoever is giving him the instructions is trustworthy. And he starts loving this, whoever is giving him these instructions, and he develops a certain connection. So he has no idea where the instructions come from, but he knows that they're reliable, and he learned to trust them. So this is, in a sense, at least according to this parable, was the idea of our relationship to Hashem. Hashem is unknowable. We cannot understand him at all. He is outside of any of our ideas. As they say, lit machshavat pisa beiklal. It's an Aramaic expression from the Zoharic literature that no thought can grasp Hashem at all. Meaning, the idea, based on the writings of Baal HaTanya, even though he doesn't exactly write that, but that's how he's quoted generally, that just like with force, with power, physical power, you cannot take a thought, right? This is just a different category. You cannot take thoughts with a hand, even if you're very muscular and strong. So too, the thought cannot grasp Hashem. Hashem is certainly a completely different type of category, if you could call it. I mean, he's unique in that category. But whatever our thoughts can grasp, the Hashem is totally outside of that. So no matter how smart you are, you cannot grasp Hashem himself. You could only talk about his will partially, and his Hanhagai, the way he rules the world. That can be discussed. But he himself is unknowable. And still, with all of that, we could develop a relationship and love and trust, bitachon, right? All kinds of connections and closeness to Hashem without understanding Hashem himself. And on this I'm going to end. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.